Everybody, welcome to the Age of Quarantine. I'm David Castillo from Saint Vitus Bar. You can follow me over at Confines World. Today's guest is the amazing Andrew Clinco, the maestro behind Drab Majesty and the amazing VR Sex, and also used to drum for Marriages and a whole bunch of other fucking cool bands. So cheers to you guys. I got a nice KCBC brew going, and happy Monday to everybody. Hope everyone's hanging in out there. It's a fucking crazy world. And I wanted to just send before we start, just a quick shout out and a bit of love to LG Petrov, the singer of Entombed, who unfortunately was diagnosed with cancer, and kind of the world found out Entombed was a very, 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 very important band for me when I was young and getting into metal. So much love to you, LG. I hope you're well, and you know, he's got a GoFundMe. Just check it out if you can. I know things are lean, but shout out to you, LG. You're a fucking legend. Let's see if we have Andrew here. All right, cool. Cheers, guys. Nice smooth beer. Aha.
Hello.
Andrew, how are you? I'm pouring myself a beer best I can while looking at the monitor. There we go. Look at that technique. I still got it, baby. Even after I'm out of practice, but here we are.
I mean, yeah, taps and cans, they're both kind of unwieldy beasts. A lot of fun.
Absolutely. So first of all, thanks for coming on the show, man. Really appreciate it. Where are you right now? Are you in Los Angeles?
I'm in Los Angeles at my home, in my living room, in my little kind of pseudo sunroom with my plants, kind of a place I go to retreat and read and get the vitamin D that I need, but not have to be kind of scorched by the sweltering heat that is LA right now. It's spending a lot of time indoors, obviously, but outside, it's kind of a blast furnace.
Yeah, totally. The world's a fucked up place, and obviously, you know, we're doing this to obviously just get in touch with all the people that we love and all of our awesomest friends from, you know, around the world and stuff like that, while we are trying to do the right things with the pandemic and stuff like that. But like I told you before, the Age of Quarantine is pretty much a show where we kind of start from the early beginnings till today, a 1 hour sort of overview of music in your life. So my first question for you is basically, when you were a young kid, when did you really like find yourself gravitating towards music? What were some of your earliest memories?
I mean, I was raised in a family. My father is a guitarist and a composer. He toured extensively with Henry Mancini for a long time, and Kurt and I grew up kind of going to his gigs, watched him play the whole when I was very always kind of knew music was probably in my trajectory, but didn't really fully embrace it until I was about in which I started playing drums. Prior to that, though, I was gifted a guitar by him. I mean, guitars were always laying around couches, various surfaces of the house, and I would pick them up. My dad's a right-handed guitarist. I play lefty, so I really was just kind of making noise, and very kind to let me play his expensive instruments, but you know, I really showed no serious interest in the guitar. However, he did buy me a guitar for Christmas when I was 8, I believe. It actually came from Manny's, rest in peace, in New York.
Oh, wow!
It's and that became the first Drab Majesty guitar. It was this little red duosonic guitar that I have sitting on the couch right now. I pulled it out of hibernation. I kind of dismissed it and took up drums because I thought drums were just kind of more badass. And luckily, I had a garage that kind of had it converted into a sound-treated room, and I had a drum set there and started playing. And yeah, just kind of just smashing on the drums, not really composing anything note, although there is a record of my best friend in kindergarten. I played a talent show with him when I was kind of had some interest in the guitar, and we We did a cover of Jude, actually.
Oh wow, a Sonic Youth cover at that early age.
Well, no, it was Beatles "Hey Jude," but
oh,
yeah.
Beatles "Hey Jude." Sorry, I heard something different.
Oh,
it was a little
it,
in and out.
it was Beatles "Hey Jude," and my father was kind enough to compose a backing track that had the kind of bass note changes and like a very temp drum track, and me and my buddy guitar for a talent show. And there's still some record of this. I think my folks have it on VHS somewhere.
Was that like your first public performance? Is probably at 5 years old.
First public performance, yeah, like first grade or something like that. Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty wild. And to come up in such a performing arts sort of family, so this was something that was not only encouraged but like facilitated. I mean, your dad's making backing tracks.
Yeah, it was amazing. I'm so grateful for it. My folks have always been incredibly supportive of my artistic endeavors. I think, you know, I owe them everything for that. But yeah, it was funny. I mean, I was playing to a backing track essentially at 6 years old, and then cut to 20 plus later, here I am playing to backing track. But yeah, that was really the first performance. But then I kind of dismissed guitar. I was like, nah, drums are just kind of more physical. I think I was digging drummers more when I was listening to music. Jimi Hendrix, my first record that I ever owned. Are You Experienced, and kind of tripping out on Mitch Mitchell and how insane his drumming style was, which kind of led to my interest in jazz music as well. But he was kind of like the first drummer that I was like, wow, this is.
Yeah, actually, it's Jimi Hendrix is huge for me as well. I was like, I'm first generation Colombian, so my parents really, it was mostly Latin music that was playing in my house. But my best friend, his parents were like hippies, and they would play Jimi Hendrix, and I fucking loved it. And so it was like one of those BMG club, like penny club things, and Jimi Hendrix just blew. That was huge for me as well.
I return to Hendrix all the time. Always baffling.
Oh, we got a little signal back up there. Hold on. Sorry, guys. Give it a second.
David, sorry.
And no, it's all right.
It
happens, you know. We're doing the best we can with what we got. So you go back to Hendrix all the time.
I do. It's usually kind of if I have people of disparate musical backgrounds hanging out and I don't know what to put on, no matter what, if it's Beatles, if it's Axis Bold as Love, if, you know, whatever it is, it's one of those great levelers and great common denominators of people with different music tastes. Everyone can agree that Hendrix is incredible. There's nobody like him, and there'll never be like him. And it's just, yeah, it's amazing. And the fact that he did all that in his 20s is just, it's really humbling. Like, it makes you feel like, it makes me want to burn my instrument, but it also, alien existed and set the bar that long ago. And yeah, nothing compares. But
yeah, no, he changed. You know, he changed the game. I mean, people had to come. There's like a whole industry of like pedal makers that were trying to make the sounds he was making with his hands. I mean, and you know, very much more primitive gear. So the creativity which he approached things is just kind of unrivaled. So as you know, kind of started getting into music and feeling stuff like that, what was your sort of, and you know, you're playing drums and you're getting acquainted with this stuff, what was your first foray into kind of more underground music and kind of participating a bit on that level?
Well, I think okay, so in middle school, I had an English teacher that I really gravitated towards. She was probably younger than me now, and think about it. But this was kind of when Coachella was starting, and she was a big, avid Warp Records enthusiast. So she turned me on to Warp Records, and turned me on to Aphex Twin and Boards of Canada. And kind of my early, maybe 12 years old, 12 years old, diving deep into British electronic, Autechre, that kind of stuff. And it was so musical, so moving, and alien sounding. I then was like, well, okay, I want to make electronic music. So I got this really primitive program called Reaper, and then moved to a program Season and all this computer stuff, which I would love to be able to find at some point. I don't know where it's been, on a hard drive or an old, Tower IBM computer or something like that. But that kind of got me thinking about just like synth music and underground or underground-ish synth. I guess maybe it was underground at the time. I know Aphex Twin is a household name.
Yeah, but at the same time, now it is, but when it was coming up, it felt so subversive, and it was so, it was more in the buzz bin. It was still kind of like coming at it that way, and then obviously getting into all the other Warp stuff. I mean, Aphex Twin is like the biggest of that kind of whole diaspora of stuff as well. So it's I love Warp and all that kind of stuff, and like Venetian snares and things of that nature were really I heard that more in college, and it was really like mind breaking. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, Broadcast too. Like that was another big one. Broadcast was a big influence. But she took a liking to me and just kind of turned me on to this music. She would give me her CDs, and I would play them in my Walkman at school. And I developed a cool bond with her. She had an assignment she gave where she said, okay, if anybody can take the morning announcement that would go over the loudspeaker at the school I was at, which were basically like, okay, today's menu is hamburgers and macaroni and cheese, and the girls' volleyball, blah, blah. There was an announcement that was made. She said, you could take these announcements and turn it into a rap or a song, a lyrical song. You would get 100 points extra credit. Now, I wasn't the best students, really, but I usually made up for that, like, project or doing the best illustration or, the creative stuff. I could usually find my way B+ or a B. And I took that seriously, and I took one of the Boards of Canada songs that was on the record Music Has the Right to Children. I took these morning announcements and created a lyrical song over that instrumental. And she was like blown away and then I was like, okay, this was actually really fun. Over a structure, which is really just, the song is just kind of a droning beat. And I came up with kind of, it was not really a rap, but it was more just like lyrical in time over that song. And it was really fun. And that kind of...
Was that your first composition?
I think it was my first lyrical composition that I committed to recording, because we had to record it. So, yeah.
Did you record that at home? Was it like, okay, I'm going to record this, and then we were playing it over the morning announcement like on Friday?
They didn't play it over the school. We played it within the classroom, and I recorded it on one of those mini cassette, like, voice memo things with, like, the track playing in the same room. I had no...
Oh, we got a little hiccup. It's cool. It happens. He'll be back in a second. Everyone in LA is using the internet, guys. This is what happens.
Sorry.
No, it's cool. We'll go back. We'll go back. So, you recorded it in the same room with a mini cassette player as the track is playing, like a voice recorder?
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
And I had to figure out a way to amp that in the classroom space, because it had like a mini output on the voice memo thing. I ended up connecting it to the computer speakers. It sounded like a cool lo-fi recording. She was like,
yeah, definitely. Like real like room ambience and like the whole nine, right? Like that's what people they mess around on their computer a lot to get that shit.
Exactly. Yeah, it's funny using hi-fi equipment to degrade. And I love hi-fi lo-fi recording, but that was just a pure lo-fi, as demo as it could possibly get. But Yeah, I wish I could find that too, but these things kind of get swept away into the ether. But yeah.
Yeah, no, it's funny how many things are left on like the cutting room floor, or like your sort of progression as a musician that you sometimes you really think about it, you know, like there's a couple things that I've done that haven't seen the light of day when I was like a kid or I was younger, and I was like, when I, you know, some things I'm so happy that they're not around, but there's certain things where I'm like, oh man, that was actually kind of cool now that I'm thinking about it, but we just never really got it together to make it, you know, happen. Moving into high school and stuff, when did you start joining bands?
Okay, so about in high school, I was just kind of jamming. I went to actually a Catholic high school for a minute, and I was kind of trying to find musicians there, but nobody had really great music taste. So I was kind of shit out of luck for people that I wanted to play with. It wasn't actually till I reconnected with my childhood best friend, the one that I did that Hey Jude performance with at the talent show in first grade. I reconnected with him. We had buds off and on through the whole time, but I actually moved into an apartment, a total grimy warehouse space on Broadway Boulevard in downtown LA in 2003, actually. And we had this crazy space. He had already gone to Los Angeles recording school, so he had all this recording knowledge. And we moved into this apartment together, this big loft space. It was above a restaurant, next to like a Norteño bar. It was really cool. It was really just like a vibrant scene in downtown LA, kind of pre-gentrification. There was only a couple bars down there. We had all this space. We had no neighbors or anything. And he's like, yeah, you have a drum set. Why don't you bring the drum set in here? Like, I have all this recording equipment, these microphones. Like, I would love to just jam and record stuff. So he and I just started making some songs. And, like, I had this kit set up, and it was fully mic'd all the time. And my bed was just, 10 feet away. And his bed was only separated by these little kind of accordion screens, and the whole basically was like a live work studio. We just started making recordings, and a lot of it just turned into kind of more like psychedelic world, or just noisy, groovy, psychedelic shit. I don't. It's really hard to pinpoint the experimentations, but that kind of morphed into a project we did. And then now I'm about 23, 24. And
did you go to college at all?
I did. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, that's kind of when music took went to the back burner actually. I went to Otis. I went to an art college and majored as a fine artist. So I have a degree in sculpture, and all that seemed really real and seemed like that was going to be my trajectory. And then kind of at the last minute, towards the end there, I realized, well, okay, after I get out of this school, like, what schools do I actually do anything? I'm going to essentially try to find myself a studio, make a body of work that I'm not sure who will appreciate. Once you lose college, the camaraderie and the collective, discussions and daily critiques, you have to lose all that. It's really hard to kind of maintain a practice as an artist. So I was like, well, I should probably do music. I really want to tour. That was kind of my main impetus to continue to do music. I hadn't really toured yet. And I was thinking, I want to see the world. I want to travel while I'm young, while my body can handle that. So I kind of shelved my artistic practice, and it was that was the time that I coincided with meeting Emma Brundle and started playing in her band, The Nocturne. And
because Emma, I forget, Emma's also a native Los Angeles. Angelino, right? Is that the term?
That's the proper nomenclature. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right, cool. So in that regard, so at that time though, it feels like though jamming with your literally like your childhood, like your first band dude ever. You probably learned so much. I think that those things that, you know, people never hear about, you know, you just jamming next to this Mexican norteño bar like for hours all the time. I mean, that is what really builds you into the musician that you are at the time. It gives you style. Do you feel like you got kind of to different levels playing drums and you felt a little bit more like, oh yeah, I want to continue to do this. I'm starting to feel more and more confident in the practice of just playing, you know, because you could do it all the time based on like the setup.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really nice having the freedom to experiment, having a really, really cheap rent. My rent was for 1,200 feet. The rent was $1,200, which is
wow, $1 a square foot. Fuck, in LA.
Yes,
Unheard of.
Unheard of. Yeah, and it'll never be heard again. But yeah, it was just a great time where my overhead was low. I had money, and I was just able to experiment with recording techniques. My friend was showing me a lot of stuff. My chops as a drummer. Yeah, and then I was so I came into meeting Emma. She found out I was a drummer. She heard me play, and at the time was looking to get another drummer to fill the seat in her band, the Nocturnes. And that was actually the first actual tour that I ever did, which was a little West Coast tour that she and her other bandmate Paris booked themselves, and I kind of learned how it all worked.
So that's sort of your first interaction with kind of the more DIY style of doing kind of music in general, was kind of this meeting up with Emma and then her kind of and her bandmate showing you the ropes a little bit of that world.
Yeah, absolutely. She had already had a lot of like, you know, touring prowess in Red Sparrows, and that kind of gave her the you know, the understanding of how shit works. And self-booking a tour is way crazier, obviously, than having a booking agent doing all the legwork. And it was really humbling and cool to watch happen and show up to the gigs and like do it, you know, just do it all DIY. And of course, that's how it was for the next 7-8 years, until I recently got representation by a booking agency in the last 2 years, and I love that. I got very comfortable with that style. Booking your own tours is awesome.
I mean, that's how we met. You know?
Yeah, precisely. I know. Well, I've multiple occasions I've played. I think 3 or 4 times. All on.
Yeah, I mean, all the way since the first EP. You know, when it first, you know, kind of started popping off, and you know, it got put on my radar. But I feel like what's really interesting about this is, and this is what you hear a lot, I think, a commonality that I've been kind of pulling out of a lot of these conversations is, one, whether you're talking to like Lex from Daughters in Rhode Island, or like, you know, in New York and in Brooklyn, and in like the Yeah Yeah Yeahs and like Nick Zinner and people like that. There was like a moment where cities were cheap enough, people were able to kind of grab a bunch of room, like physical space, actual room, and just create themselves and do certain things, and then linking with this sort of DIY mentality to kind of take it out of those places, whether it's a warehouse in Brooklyn, Rhode Island, a room next to a bar in LA, you know? Absolutely. And that's the way you start seeing those things sort of progress. So, and it's an amazing sort of thing to learn that, you know, if you listen to the music of, you know, Marriages to Drab Majesty, etc., that's very different. The aesthetics are, I mean, we're talking way different, but the learnings, the behind the scenes stuff, that's the stuff that you continue to take through the journey.
Absolutely, man. I kind of feel bad for certain musicians that get thrust into the spotlight and have an entire, you know, infrastructure developed for them overnight that don't actually get to do the legwork and the you know, the booking of the tours and this, going to the, you know, post office and mailing your merch and silk screening your own merch and all these kind of like humbling, you know, character building practices that are kind of, I feel, crucial to the overall experience. Being a supernova overnight is exciting, and it's sensational, and I commend people that can achieve that, but also it's kind of a curse too, I think, in a lot of ways. Where do you go from there if things don't continue at that rate? It's scary. So I know that if I'm starting a new band. I've started a new band over the last 3 years, VR Sex. And I am grateful to have Deus supporting that as well. But it's still reminding me of like the early days. When I started the band, I put some T-shirts up on Bandcamp. I had like 90 packages piled up on my ship, and like handwriting every single address and all that. It was like good. Like I love this stuff. Beautiful.
Yeah, and it makes it personal, and it gives you that interaction, I think, with not the people who are listening to you, and you're really like, you're the point of communication. And I always love that. It made you feel that, there's not much of a barrier. And then as you kind of go up, you can know who the people that you really want to work with as well, that hold the same values, whether it's at Deus or whomever. So talk to me a little bit about how the relationship with Emma kind of continued to blossom into the band Marriages, and how that kind of came to be. Because I think that, to me, that was where, when I first came across, it's like, I was like, the drummer from the band Marriages has this fucking sick goth side project. You gotta listen to it. I think that you would really like it. That's how it was. I was like, okay, let me listen,
Who told you about it? How did you find out about it?
Yeah, that was basically it. And I was just like, I liked Marriages, but it was like, it's wildly different, from that. But I'm like, this dude, if he can hang with these folks, this diaspora folks, he knows how to make music. So I want to check it out, But how did Marriages come together, and just tell me a little bit about that period, because it was quite a bit of time that you were in that band.
It was, yeah. So basically, like I said, Nocturnes was Emma's band prior to Marriages, and Marriages started because Kathy, who runs Sargent House, they needed someone to open a Russian circle show at the Troubadour. And Emma was like, well, I've been jamming with Greg Burns of Red Sparrows and Dave Clifford, who was the drummer of Red Sparrows as well. And we've decided, we've come up with this cool EP. It's 20-something minutes long. We'd love to commit it to a recording, and we'd also like to call it a band. So they played this show. The band happened. They did a little bit of a South by Southwest on that album. Dave Clifford then dropped out of the band, and now the drum seat again was open in her band. And she's like, well, I remember playing in Nocturnes. Like, let's bring Andrew in. So then, I was like, great. I would be happy to. I'd already met Kathy, formed a rapport with her. And the whole Sargent House world was so friendly and cool. I was just kind of ushered into it by proxy. And we started playing, rehearsing. We had a space here in downtown LA, and that slowly kind of all over a period of time, probably in a year or two at least. But we did some tours, and it did record, that LP Salome, which was pretty taxing to make. It was an arduous record, and it ended up, I ended up really loving it. It was just a heavy process, and we toured on it, and we did some really fantastic tours. And my first experience in Europe was through Marriages, and supporting Woven Hand, which was a big honor and a huge learning experience. That was really eye-opening to support Woven Hand. And
sure. And also getting to Europe, obviously another big, I think, feather in the cap of like any musician who's touring is just to go internationally. All of a sudden, it gives you a lot of just perspective on anything, right? Traveling's always good. Unfortunately, we can't do it now, but traveling's always great, and it gives you a lot of perspective on how music works and in front of different audiences and how you feel. How did it feel working with Emma, who's obviously, does her own songwriting and just, is such a strong compositional voice and stuff, and you coming in as a drummer? Because obviously with Drab, that all kind of flips around, you know. But for you, you're playing the role of drummer. Would you consider yourself a little bit more of like a writing drummer, or was it more like, hey, here's a bunch of, you know, kind of material, and like I have more things in mind?
Both, actually. She was so kind enough to give me like a lot of my autonomy in the drum parts that I created. It wasn't like, hey, I want you to play a 2/4 song and part I want you to do this. It was more like, yes, I'm asking you to play in my band because I like your style, and my style of drums is not traditional rock drummer. I like playing melodically on the drums. I like reacting to vocal melody. Just thinking about it as a harmonic instrument, actually, more than truly a rhythm instrument. I like grooving on the toms a lot, which is more tribal groove, propulsive kind of style. And she gave me that autonomy, and I was really grateful for that. In the same token,
that's really huge too to think about that too. You know, like a lot of people don't think about like the tuning of the drums and those aspects. And
it's very
at those times. It's like where drumming goes from. There's levels to this game, and that's like huge. And I always thought that about marriages. I always had like a really nice propulsive aspect, and like on the very tom heavy.
Tom heavy, yeah. I love toms. I love hand drums. I love toms. I love just anything that can that just keeps the propulsion out the strongest backbeat. I think a backbeat, it can be like a payoff moment. It's always nice to just bring in a snare when it's time for the snare, or use the snare as this event rather than having it just be like, it's like, that's great. I love that kind of drumming as well, but there is something magical to an orchestral approach to the drums, and I love that. That's what I kind of got to do in marriages, and that was really cool. Meanwhile, though, I was kind of secretly taking notes on her guitar style and her guitar playing, as well as the other guitarists of the band I mentioned prior, Nocturnes. Both their guitar styles were fingerstyle based, and was really inspiring to see that actually happen in real time, in real life. I'd never seen a fingerstyle guitar player actually, like, or been in the company of one. Everybody that I'd known and played have just been like pick chuggers, or maybe flat picking, but nothing having to do with the, you know, the dexterity of, you know, all of our, and that was really amazing. And that kind of,
it's really interesting how like playing with different people and finding those techniques sort of happen. Like Mike from Yob was on this show, and I was just asking like about different moments that changed him as a musician, and one of them was working at a guitar store with a bunch of people who were really into country music and were super into finger, you know, techniques and picking and stuff like that. And he's like, I learned more voicings with the guitar, and it changed my whole fucking game. So for you, it was, you were kind of watching from afar, and yet, like you were saying, taking notes from Emma.
Absolutely. And it's funny you say guitar store, because actually the lineage of her playing and that folk style playing actually does come from a guitar store here in Los Angeles. It comes from a place called McCabe. It's been around forever. It's in Santa Monica. It's an institution. So she was working at this guitar store, as was the other fellow in that band. And that guitar store both functions as a music performance and a retail store. And the performance space has a lot of folk players that come in and play. Like Jorma Kalkinen of Jefferson Airplane is a regular there, and he does folk style stuff. They've had Mark Kozilek of Red House Paint there back in the day, and he's another huge influence of the folk guitar that I was introduced to through this guitar shop. This guitar shop, it's all kind of serendipitously interrelated, but I was also working at a bar in this guitar shop, in which regulars and employees of the guitar shop would come and hang out at this bar. But I was kind of filtered. I was kind of like fostered into the folk guitar world through McCabe, through their employees, who are sweet as can be, an amazing institution. It still exists, thank God, and I hope it still exists after COVID. It's been around 60 plus years. But yeah, so this entire folk approach, finger picking approach, which is always so mesmerizing to me, because it's so many notes generated with a single person. you're a one-man band. You're both the bass line and the melody and the rhythm, and it's you can as a folk style player you can carry a whole tune in your hands, and I think that's really interesting. So I was kind of,
I mean, that right there, it says so much too to the progression, right? It's like you can carry a whole tune in your hand. I love that phrase, you know, because I feel like in my mind's eye when I'm like, all right, Andrew's at his desk, he programmed a beat that he kind of likes, and he picks up that guitar, and then I'm like, that's where really everything starts really coming together, you know, because of those sort of picking techniques that I think, honestly, in more of the more modern sort of synth and goth scene that you're situated in now, at least, no one's really playing like that or bringing that at this point. Maybe, you know, in the 80s and stuff like that, there were obviously bands that were doing it then, but you're bringing that kind of level of guitar playing here. And that's interesting that started when you were in Marriages and working with Emma and you know, I'm sorry, I forget the other gentleman's name who was in the band as well. But just taking notes from all those things. And that goes to show, I think, for everybody out there, it's like being part of creative community is just that. It's just like looking around and sort of getting inspired and seeing that. That's one of the most amazing things, you know. I just think cool shit happens all the time. I have absolutely nothing to do with. And I'm like so excited to walk into some stuff and like, all of a sudden somebody started a new band or there's a TV show happening or some crazy stuff. And that's what the magic is. It can happen with between a couple of places, and all of a sudden, Mutoid Man pops up, or Drab Majesty pops up, or something like that. And it's a product of all of this whole community, this whole thing. And I love these little moments where you're like, yeah, I was at the bar, and this dude walked in, and we started talking about guitar, and I remembered that conversation.
Always, yeah. There's some of those pivotal moments that it's crazy. That'll just completely send you on a new path or shape the way you forge your path. Yeah, it's really cool. I have a lot of moments, and for, you know, basically it basically morphed into, I started finger picking on my own, listening to, it was just kind of a secret experiment, a secret project, and then I presented it to Emma. I said, hey, look, I'm trying to finger pick. Any tips you can give me? And there was another guy who worked at that store and was like, yeah, you want to, like, you know, this is how your thumb needs to be oriented, and this is, you know, this is like the classic, like 1-4 kind of motion. And I was just, it wasn't at all to start any project. It was just like, I want to be able to do this. It was just like learning a language. I want to be able to carry a tune in my hand, like, you know, like I said, and maybe not even to sing with it. I just love the hypnosis of this style.
And that's just like a beautiful aim. I want to carry a tune in my hand, and like that's the goal. Let's start with that, and then
there was not about
what'll happen.
Yeah, it wasn't about forming a band. It wasn't about me even making recordings. It was like, I would just like to, you know, I love it's finger picking is very much like drums as well. It's 16th note oriented or triplet oriented, but it's filling space, it's repetition, and I think I gravitated to that because of a rhythmic thing. It's a very rhythmic and propulsive, going back to the tom thing, a very propulsive practice of keeping this motor going on the hand.
Yeah, and I feel like it works really well with when I listen to Drab Majesty and stuff, like arpeggiated things,
yeah,
you know, like on the synth and stuff like that. It really just, when things are hitting right, it starts giving it like a different movement when you bring the guitar in that has like a much more 16th note based thing. And I'm like, I see how you approach kind of like the grooves and the melodies working together so tightly. And that was something that I think really jumps off the speakers for me when I listen to Drab Majesty, for sure.
All my tracks employed arpeggio guitar. That's just a fact. You look at Column, Felt, even Johnny Marr. He's not a finger picker, but it's just this constant moving, these flourishes, this just these patterns that repeat. And while yes, they're complicated, all you're doing is bringing out the nuances of a chord in a rhythmic fashion, and that shit just sounds great in a mix. It sounds it brings interest. And you know what? That being said, I love chugging distorted punk guitar more than anything, and that's an amazing thing in its own. And just bonehead bar chords, I think, are magical, and that conveys a whole different sonic force. But when we're talking about a glassy kind of almost like a Bach toccata, or these harpsichord where it's just constant 16th notes, it just washes over. While it might be very complicated, maybe on paper, you're not hearing each individual note, not being confused. But it's not even like a meandering jazz solo. I do like as well, but when it's just this propulsive rhythm based on a chord here, a chord there, you can insert a lot of information and convey a lot of emotion with actually very little movement. Because sometimes it doesn't look like you're doing a lot, but it sounds like you're doing a lot, because all the force notes come from the picking hand.
Sure. So it gives it just so much movement. And again, you're really like pretty static as far as like left hand's concerned for you, right hand, but it's like a lot's going down on the other, and it really creates a really beautiful effect. So let me ask you, you're playing in marriages, things are going pretty cool, but it feels like it was obvious that you had something else to offer us, which was Drab Majesty, and it was, you were starting to pull certain things out for yourself. When did you really make that decision to be like, I need to start composing more, or did it just kind of start happening sort of naturally, or how did it feel to kind of just, take that leap?
Well, I would liken it to, as a drummer, you're basically, let's say you're just the guy in the shipping and receiving department of a business, and you've worked there for,
That's great.
Out to the business, the people that are running the business, how the business is run, and eventually you're like, yeah, I do work in shipping and receiving, but I think I could actually manage this business. I think I get it, despite my limited role right now. And that was the kind of move that I proposed to Emma, and I said, hey, I have a song that I wrote, and I would like to offer it. I know I am the drummer, I know my duty, and I don't want to step on any toes, and harmonically and melodically, this is your, but I would like to maybe offer a song. That song, I played her the song, and she said, this is great. That was basically the first song that I ever wrote that was on guitar that was committed to recording, and it was the song Contender, which is the last on the Salome record, the Marriages record. And she heard it. She's like, "This is sick. Like, I would love to record." I ended up even doing a guitar pass on it. Oddly enough, that was the first time I had recorded guitar that was committed to a record. Was this?
Oh wow! I did not know that.
Contender song. I've actually never talked about that in an interview, funnily enough. So I'm grateful that she was able to, again, give me autonomy, respect my attempts at playing guitar.
Yeah, but it's a good shot in the arm too, right? With someone you respect that you work with, and you're trying to step out and do a little something, and when they're like, "Yo, this is rad," like this is cool. It's like, oh, okay, cool. It gives you a good shot of confidence to go further, which you obviously did.
Totally.
Being Drab.
I can't imagine if she dismissed my attempts to make a statement on her instrument, where I would be now in a lot of ways. Like, oh, if I probably would have just taken that to heart and been like, yeah, you're right, this sucks. Like, but that wasn't the case, and the tune made the cut, and it made it on the record. And around that time was when I started developing Drab and writing songs kind of in the fashion of that song, but still fingerpicked, definitely more lo-fi. Bought some drum machines. There's a whole nother phase of my life that revolves around music store in Highland Park here that sells used instruments called Future Music that became a hub of culture, discourse, and gear talk among nerds that really kind of set me in my path to pursuing this kind of music and embracing the classic instruments that were made, all like drum machines, you know, analog synths, where I purchased all my guitar pedals, and it's just, I would show up there. There's a wonderful friend by the name of Jack that works there, and he would school me on rack gear and tape machines and you know, all this stuff. I started to amass the equipment from there because it was very cheap. It's still a store. It's and I hope it also makes it through the COVID shit. But yeah, and I started to kind of apply those and kind of turn this folk approach into a more new arpeggiated guitar style.
Yeah, it's really interesting that I would never have thought to connect those dots, but they're only connected really by your biography, like a finger-picking folk style that then you started getting into kind of analog synth gear and stuff like that, and how to, you know, kind of create that. And what I think you have a really leg up on, which I think a lot of people don't really know too, is in programming drums, because you're a drummer too. Just the thought pattern behind doing those sorts of things is, you know, sometimes if I'm programming drums, I almost imagine if I'm at a drum kit and I'm like, how would I, and then I like look at the, you know, 16, you know, steps, and I'm like, okay, you know, and I try and figure it out, or I'm like looking even at a video of a friend drumming, or like someone I like, you know. For you, I feel like that seems more instantly translatable to create your backing tracks, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think I omitted one part of my history is that in high school I played in the drum line. Actually, I played snare drum, like competitive snare drum line. So I was very.
Oh shit! Really? That's sick.
Yeah, I did. Pretty wild. And it was there. I still can't read like staff music, but I can read drum music, and I got very accustomed to reading this like kick drum line, air line, hi-hat line.
Oh, that's like the best training possible for what you're doing right now.
For MIDI, yeah, for MIDI, because it's all still on. There's nothing moving. It's you know, it's fixed. So I can look at a MIDI grid and conceive of a drum part just graphically, visually. I can also look at a MIDI drum part already and say, oh, I can hear that. I can hear what that sounds like. I love programming. I also.
Well, I think we got a freezy. Hold on. No, it's all right. This is part of the charm of our DIY program, my friend.
I love it.
Yeah. So you were saying how you can look at the forms, you know, the either like the MIDI data or, you know, waveforms and stuff, and you can imagine how things sound just by looking at stuff, right? Which is pretty incredible to have that kind of coming into a project like Drab Majesty, where you're literally creating everything. It makes things go quicker. It's also a really cool way of just looking at stuff and being able to compose, which is one of the, I think, it's a harder leap for people to make, especially if they're trying to do a lot by themselves.
Yeah. I work really fast. I also think I sometimes have the propensity to overdo it when it comes to MIDI drum programming. I get super caught up in the finite 30-second notes and 16th notes and little plans that only I, with my hyper detailed ear, will scrutinize, but no one will hear. And I'm trying to unlearn some of that now with the RSEC stuff and just kind of stick to, is the groove good? Is it carrying the song? What else around it supporting the groove rather than the groove supporting the music? So it's a more reductionist approach, and actually
sometimes it's a lot harder to know what to take out or what not to mess with than what to add. It's always just like, man, don't ruin the thing that made the sauce good at the beginning. Don't put too much shit in it. You know, it's like, it's good. You know, you only need a couple of ingredients to make a great dish.
Yeah.
Put too many.
Yeah, listen to Suicide, and then we'll figure out how to with the most minimal of elements and only vibe. Vibe is your tool. Nothing. I mean, that's it. It's not about notes. It's not about rhythms. It's literally about spiritual vibe on the song, and that's why Suicide succeeds in the best band ever. Because
I'm gonna take another drink to that, because I wholly concur on that.
Cheers, dude.
Thinking about putting the vibe to the song and feeling the vibe, you know, through the song. So, you know, you're making this stuff, and so at a certain point, you're like, okay, I've made all this stuff, and I read that you kind of almost felt like, wow, I made all this stuff, but it's almost not even like it's almost not even me. It's kind of really far from anything I've done, right? And which is kind of exciting and scary, I think, at a certain point, right? So you're like, what do I do? Is that where kind of the drab character and just kind of the aesthetic representation of the music, is that where that really kind of started to spring up? How did you kind of start to cultivate that?
Absolutely, yeah. I think there was kind of a disjointedness in my skill set improving at a rate that when I heard it back, I couldn't really relate to it as someone that had actually composed this music. I think I had quickly enough. I spent a lot of what?
Sorry, I cut out for a hot second there. My bad. So keep going.
No worries, man. Yeah, I think my skill set kind of like evolved faster than my true understanding of my musical identity as a guitarist. And listening back to recordings I would make technique with all of these chorus pedals and delay pedals. I mean, I was knowing the things about 80s post-punk. Sure, I knew that, you know, chorus is the main coloration and all these things, but when I listen back, yeah, I don't know, I can't really call this Andrew Clinco's band. You know, this needs a identity to showcase the music, and then with that spark of inspiration came kind of calling arms my fine art background in, you know, sculpture, art, and all the artists from that world, Joan Jonas, Mike Kelly, these people that did performance art that that embodied other characters, the theatrics of that. I would try to merge those worlds together and do something that was, you know, that I didn't have to necessarily take credit for. It wasn't about hiding my. It was just about maybe not taking full ownership of the music because I just wasn't interested in that. I thought these sounds needed a voice and a performative that was something beyond me. So essentially, it became.
That's really interesting. I like that point where you're like, these songs needed to perform as something beyond me, like the physical person, to embody a greater, sort of almost an idea, right? We're embodying an idea or a feeling more than we're embodying like our own person. And I think that's really brilliant. And it does, you know, I almost forgot we only been talking for like, you know, 45 minutes, the fact that, yes, you did go to art school at first and all of that influence could just come back now at almost the perfect time.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm super grateful for that schooling and having that tool book of influence to draw from. Also, I was kind of just noting like what other bands are doing kind of more theatrical things on stage, and like I could think of some immediately. One I toured with that really kind of changed my view of how a live performance can be conducted was touring with master musicians of Bukkake, Randall Dunn's band, which not many people know about, but one of the greatest bands that's come about in the last 20 years. it's a gold mine, treasure trove of unbelievable recordings and incredible audio visual sensory overload. And we toured with them when Boris on a small West Coast just did, and that absolutely blew my mind, seeing the lead singer in a deer mask with like two fog machines blowing up alongside of him, with like fire on stage. Randall Dunn's in a UN outfit with like a headlamp, spelunking head on. Someone's in like a Yeti costume. Another guy's in a hat. This guy Milky's wearing a cowboy hat with this beautiful sequins mask. Very, very actually similar to Orville Peck. Funny because if you look at this guy Milky Burgess, who's a genius, a great guitarist, his look in Master Musicians was very similar and kind of eerily similar. I love Orville Peck. Awesome, and he's totally brilliant musician and fantastic performer. But this Milky's look was pretty interesting. So there was a lot going on,
and also for anybody out there who doesn't know, Randall Dunn is an insane producer as well. Has produced many of your favorite records. Just throwing that out there as well. So this is a group full of masterminds of music, and I agree with you. That's a great band that goes kind of overlooked because of Randall's usually behind the boards doing stuff for Earth and etc. You know, a ton of amazing bands. Steve Ontill's brand new solo record, which is incredible, like so on and so forth. But it's amazing to do that too, and I feel the same way as well. There's you know, sometimes you know, you see an awesome punk band, it's just like super stripped down, but every once in a while, you know, Portal walks through the door at Saint Vitus, and you're like, what the fuck is this? And you need all these flavors make up a great music world. So I felt for a while too, at least in the goth world, which tends to be a little bit more, you know, looks kind of like oriented and stuff. It was a lot of, you know, black leather jackets and button-down shirts, and then I was like, okay, I listened to you at first, and I was like, this is sick, and then I looked at it too, and I was like, whoa. I was like, all right, this is cool. We're going for it, and I love going for it.
Yeah,
I'm a fan of going for it.
I think it's important to those that are coming to pay money to see a show that it's often overlooked that there's the audio element, but then there's also the visual element. We're just listening on headphones in a black, dark room where the band can't be seen. I mean, I have no problem with people performing and they're playing clothes, and sometimes the music is just that good to carry it on, and you don't think about it because all the built in the songs. But I do appreciate it when bands take that little extra step at, like, you know, at transporting me, even though the room is all these things. It's like a gallery, and then the stage is the podium. And what are you putting on the podium? And also, like, my favorite band is Devo. Okay, so Devo are the masters of that. They found their aesthetic. They drove it home. They morphed it subtly throughout time. But it didn't take that much. I mean, they just put on, you know, some like amazing jumpsuits, and you know, the radiation hats and the energy domes, and then it was done, and it looks amazing, and you're just, wait, I'm not even watching people play right now, I'm watching something else. It's like,
yeah, and when you see other artists do it and you realize the barrier of entry to transporting isn't that high as well, like you said, it could be something simple, but that's really key and makes like a really big impact. It's like a simple riff that's really great. So we got about 90 seconds left. This went by real quick.
Yeah.
Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and to see you.
Great.
And thanks for sharing your stories with us. And we got into some really great stuff. And, you know, I just appreciate you. And please stay safe and be good in Los Angeles.
I appreciate you too, man. I hope Saint Vitus is here to stay. And I owe you a lot for, you know, supporting the band and providing a space for me to play. And it's always been a staple, a New York staple for me, and it's something I look forward to going. Even if I don't have a gig there, I love attending your bar, and everybody that works there is awesome. And it's,
thanks a lot. It means a lot.
Ever.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what? It means a lot, and we can only do what we do with great artists and artists who continue to do amazing things.